A warm welcome to the KUTV Primetime News, this Mashujaa edition, the 20th day of the month of October 2022. And a lot has been happening in the country, including the Mashujaa Day celebrations. And also, guess who? Miguna is back in the country, choosing quite the day to be back in the nation. And a lot has been happening, and our team here at KUTV has been keen to compile reports, starting with tonight's highlights. Kenya marks Mashujaa Day with President William Ruto hosting his first national celebration as the head of state. Canadian-based Kenyan lawyer Miguna, who has been exiled since 2018, has finally returned to the country. President Ruto defends his recent decisions touching on matter security, saying it's time to act. Alert with 61 cholera cases confirmed in 6 counties. Heroes, welcome to you wherever you are, and welcome to the KUTV Prime Time News. That is also streaming on YouTube at KUTV Kenya and on Facebook at KUTV Kenya. My name is EMMANUEL KUTOSI, and in the sign language interpretation will be sailing through with the Sami Okelo. The Thursday night KUTV Prime Time News starts now. Kenyans today commemorated Mashujaa Day, the first one under the leadership of President William Samoei Arap Ruto since his inauguration in September. The event, which was held at Uhuru Gardens Memorial Park, saw Kenyans entertained by various artists, apart from a showcase from the disciplined forces. Our reporter Eugene Mayabi prepared the following report and gives us a blow-by-blow on how the situation was like.
Thursday, 7 a.m., Kenyans from various parts of the country arrived at Uhuru Gardens Memorial Park to celebrate the 59th Mashujaa Day. This being the first event led by President William Ruto since his inauguration a month ago. Low turnout was witnessed even as political leaders continued to stream in, including Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka. Security had been beefed up within the stadium, with soldiers ready to deal with anyone who would cause chaos. Kenyans wore different types of clothing, including the ruling party primary color. The procession of the president finally arrived at the stadium, with the head of state waving to the ecstatic crowd who were chanting messages of welcome as he was taken around the arena while being escorted by presidential motorcade. He later inspected the guard of honor, this being his second time doing so. Kenyans were later entertained courtesy of students, singers and KDF air show that flew in the sky with a thank you banner. Unlike other celebrations, local heroes and heroines including runners, footballers and rugby players were aired on the field screen as one of the ways to remember them.
Anashikilia rekodi ya dunia katika mbio za marathon, huku David Rudisha.
The event finally culminated at 2 p.m. after the president and his deputy addressed Kenyans as expected. Eugene Mayabi, KUTV.
And as that played out, guess who? Lawyer Miguna finally arrived in the country early today from Canada, where he has been staying since his deportation in 2018. He was deported following his role in the swearing-in of opposition chief Raila Odinga as the people's president in 2018 January, after the disputed 2017 presidential elections, with a contest also arising over his citizenship. His arrival comes after the government lifted the red alerts imposed on him.
A few minutes after 6 a.m. in the morning, A Kenya Airways plane carrying lawyer, politician and activist Miguna landed at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Miguna was received by relatives and Kenyans who had lined up to receive him after announcing via his Twitter account that he will arrive in the country in the morning of Thursday 20th of October. His arrival comes after his deportation to Canada in 2018. While addressing the press, he thanked Kenyans for the warm welcome, adding that he is extremely happy to be back home and will be announcing his move soon. Thereafter, he attended the Mashujaa celebration at the Uhuru Gardens. The shortfall of Miguna began after his involvement in the swearing-in of National Super Alliance leader Raila Odinga on 30th of January 2018, an act which was against the Constitution. A few days later, he was arrested by the police, who reprimanded him for a while before deporting him to Canada. His arrest was opposed by the NASA coalition, leading to a series of protests in the streets of Nairobi, demanding for his return to the country. In 2018, the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, in a report he confirmed that Miguna's arrest came after his involvement in the swearing-in of Raila Odinga. A statement by the Minister of Interior and Coordination of National Government, led by Fred Matiang'i, read that, as I quote, "Miguna, who is not a citizen of Kenya and whose presence in Kenya is contrary to national interest, be removed from Kenya to his country of origin, Canada." However, in 2018, the High Court Magistrate Weldon Korir ordered the government to organize for the return of Miguna, which it failed to obey and instead imposed red alerts on him. It was a sigh of relief to his return when President Ruto ordered the removal of the red alerts to allow him back to the country. Shadrach Simiu, KUTV.
And from that report, President William Ruto has laid out a raft of measures in his administration and he has put in place to improve food security by boosting the agricultural sector. In his maiden national celebration address at the Mashujaa Day celebration, which was held at the Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi, Dr. Ruto said his government has planned short-term, medium-term and long-term strategies to enhance food security. As our reporter Jeff Mwangi lays it down.
With roughly 4 million Kenyans grappling with hunger and starvation, ensuring the country's food security moving forward is among the new government's top goals.
Government's first intervention to address the fertilizer challenge and make it available to counties and regions that plant in the short rains was to import 1.5 million 50-kilogram bags and distribute them at a lower price of Kenya shillings 3,500 per 50-kilogram bag.
For the short-range measures, the head of state cited the ongoing subsidized fertilizer program, which his government introduced last month after announcing that it will not subsidize food prices.
Continue with the fertilizer import program, but in the medium term, the government plans to have fertilizer manufactured in partnership with EAC countries in our region.
In the near future, President Ruto said his government is considering partnering with the East African Community member states to build a fertilizer manufacturing plant.
We have to increase agricultural productivity as a first step. We will support all farmers to access quality inputs such as seeds, fertilizer and pesticides, among others, and also ensure that our farmers have access to extension services in order to improve farming skills.
He insisted that his administration will take bold steps to end the cycle of hunger and dependency on rain-fed agriculture within the shortest time possible. This, the president said, will include improving access to agricultural inputs such as seeds and pesticides to farmers.
And to address this challenge, we are working on innovative investment mechanisms through public-private partnership to construct at least 100 dams. Consequently, it would be possible to progressively irrigate the 3 million acres already identified as irrigable land.
At the same time, however, the head of state noted that irrigation is its administration's long-term goal in addressing food security. He said that his government will construct 100 dams across the country to foster food production with a priority on rice irrigation schemes in Bura and the Tana Delta, Garissa as well as Moya and Ahero. The president also addressed long-term solutions to drought and climate change mitigation and asked every Kenyan to plant at least 300 trees. Jeff Mwangi, KUTV.
And still on the events of the day, an immediate recruitment of 2,700 forest rangers and 600 forest officers to drive the government agenda to increase Kenya's forest cover to more than 30% by 2030 is on course. This follows up directive by President William Ruto today during the Mashujaa Day celebrations at Uhuru Gardens in his bid to address climate change.
In his speech during Mashujaa Day celebrations, which held at Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi, Dr. Ruto said that Kenya is concerned about climate change and its impact on the country as a whole, and in particular the arid and semi-arid regions.
Pasture due to prolonged drought, the worst in 40 years, and 3 years of absolute rain failure. As a result, we have lost 2.5 million heads of livestock owing to this very severe drought.
He further added that the country is currently faced with a severe drought, the worst in 40 years due to failed rains and 3 years of absolute rain failure. Additionally, the president noted that the data of Kenya's forest cover was alarming since only 5.2 million square kilometers of Kenya's 59.2 million square kilometers is under forest cover.
Of the 59.2 million hectares land in Kenya, only 5.2 hectares are under forest cover. The remaining 54 million hectares are largely in arid and semi-arid areas. The 10 counties with the highest forest cover are Nyeri, Lamu, Vihiga, Kirinyaga, Elgeyo Marakwet, Meru, Embu, Murang'a, Kilifi, and Nyandarua.
The head of the state highlighted that the government is in the final stages of designing a special presidential forestry and rangeland restoration acceleration program. The head of the state said that he will soon inaugurate a climate change council that will steer Kenya's climate action through stakeholders' engagements coordinated in the presidency as required by Climate Change Act 2016. The president urged all Kenyans to support the government call to grow at least 15 billion trees in the next 10 years. He also challenged governors to contribute towards effort to increase the forest cover in the counties.
I call upon the Council of Governors to facilitate more discussion to achieve parity in tree cover by using peer-to-peer learning and exchange of information. The government will champion the transformation of forestry and rangeland restoration to support the greening of Kenya so as to combat climate change.
Mary Gachu, KUTV.
All right. President William Ruto has defended his recent decisions concerning matters of security. In that matter, this follows a raft of changes in the national state security agencies. Dennis Omondi joins us with this conclusive report.
In a speech that lasted an hour, the president spoke with passion on his blueprint for the country, including how to secure Kenyans, some of who have long suffered in the hands of bandits and cattle rustlers who steal and destroy property and in unfortunate cases take human life.
They too deserve to live and work in safety and dignity and to pursue happiness without let or hindrance. And yet, terrorists, bandits, cattle rustlers, and all manner of violent criminals have held them back, extinguishing or deferring for far too long too many hopes and dreams as the rest of the country makes progress. It is time for this lawlessness to stop, and stop for good.
More changes in the security sector could be in the pipeline as President William Ruto's broom sweeps clean the country's top security agencies. Ruto has on numerous occasions decried the lack of professionalism in the way some cases have been handled by the security organs.
The independence of the National Police Service is essential for its institutional credibility and efficiency, citizen safety and welfare, and effective maintenance of law and order. A professional police service fosters harmonious relations with citizens and communities, cannot be weaponized in pursuit of divisive or partisan agenda, and can never resort to disastrous policies like extrajudicial murder as part of policing.
The President added that adequate security will be achieved without necessarily eliminating criminals through extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances. At the National Police Service, Nur Gabo took over as the new Inspector General from Hilary Mutyambai, who opted for an early retirement. And yesterday, Amin Mohammed was sworn in by Chief Justice Martha Koome as the new DCI boss following transfer of George Kinoti to the Public Service Commission.
I, Amin Mohammed Ibrahim, do swear by the Almighty God that I will not, without due authority, disclose or make known to any person any information acquired by me by reason of the duties performed by me on behalf or under the direction of the National Police Service, or by reason of any office or employment held by me pursuant to the National Police Service Act.
To completely insulate the criminal justice system, the President has guaranteed independence of the judiciary and law enforcement bodies.
Most critically, under my administration, there shall be no interference with or any attempt to control, direct, or undermine independent institutions, including those in the justice, law, and order sector. The National Police Service, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Judiciary, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission shall perform their duties independently.
Dennis Omondi, KUTV.
Still at the Uhuru Gardens on matters of economic empowerment, President William Ruto has said he is focused on instituting robust legal financial policies to foster growth of small businesses and SMEs. Susan Wayaki joins us with this conclusive report.
By supporting MSMEs, 80% of Kenyans who rely on income from small businesses will be economically empowered. Speaking during the Mashujaa celebrations, President William Ruto stated that 9 out of every 10 young people who join the workforce are absorbed by MSMEs. This explains his plan to ensure that this particular sector is given the tools to thrive. His government has committed to working with county governments to provide one street trading premises for every 50 urban residents, aimed at increasing the average income of informal traders. The government is planning on investing heavily in the ICT sector as it sees it as the future of not only the local but the global economy as well.
Fellow Kenyans, access to credit is a stimulant that invigorates the economy. However, high interest rates crowd out the private sector and especially the small and medium enterprises. Our commitment on affordable credit was at the heart of the Kenya Kwanza election campaign.
Universal broadband availability is expected throughout the country, with the president having pledged to add 100,000 kilometers of fiber optic cabling to the existing network. He also promised to reduce the cost of calls and data to allow citizens to use online platforms for businesses, information and entertainment.
Expectations are very high across the country on our promise to provide a fund that will offer affordable credit to those at the bottom of the pyramid.
The government is planning on the establishment of more art and culture in the Kenyan industry, including theatres, music auditoriums, and also facilities to expand space for artistic and cultural expression and production.
We have made several interventions to make credit accessible. Safaricom, and I want to thank them, and their financial partners have brought down the cost of Fuliza by reducing interest rates by 50%. As part of that agreement, 4 million borrowers who had been blacklisted will be freed from the yoke of Credit Reference Bureau in the coming days.
The Hustlers Fund will push for the availability of credit on some products to small businesses on digital platforms at affordable rates through chamas and other available means. For KUTV, I am Susan Wayaki.
Thank you, Wayaki, for that conclusive report on matters of the economy that the president touched on. And stay tuned, in a moment we're about to go for a break, but we'll be back with the day's discussion. We'll be looking at matters concerning the public debt. I will be joined by one notable mind that you don't want to miss, so stay tuned. In a moment, it will just be before you.
So we are plating the other parts of the Lyonnaise potatoes that have been deep fried.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College is focused on being the leading technical and vocational training institute in the region. Our team possesses in-depth knowledge and extensive experience in the industry, offering thorough training in cosmetology, hairdressing, interior design, creative arts, training of trainers, nail technology, and fashion design. With branches in Nairobi, Thika, Meru, Eldoret, and now in Mombasa, our courses ensure that learners are completely equipped with knowledge, competency, and employability skills. Enroll today to be a part of a center of excellence.
Unemployment has hit you hard. Your salary is meager. You decide to venture into business, but you're struggling to thrive in it. You would want to reap a big tip on how not to run into losses.
Forget the preachy business vlogs, the hyperbolic motivational speeches, and all the roads down desperation.
Hope has come, with model stories from small successful entrepreneurs. tell you these tales weekly on The Budding Entrepreneur. Join us as we help you make your trade profitable and often smile to the bank.
I am an open-minded person. I like learning new skills, new ideas. I plan to work harder and push myself to become better and better every day. And I plan to take every opportunity that comes my way.
An honor being the first girl to drive at that track.
I want to go all the way. I want hopefully to be one of the best in the world someday, but I want to take it day by day to keep learning my lessons, to keep failing and keep succeeding.
To knowledge, solution to unanswered questions.
Guidelines to pursuing your rights and repossessing your property, intellectual or material.
This and more only on Law Matters.
Welcome back to KUTV Prime Time News, the Mashujaa edition, a day which we commemorate our heroes who fought for independence, heroes who fought to see a change within the country. They wanted actually to ensure there's prosperity for their youth, their children, and these were heroes who fought for a lot. And currently we are moving in a period where we are looking at matters as they are. It is like a moment to actually take tabs and actually note how far have we come, looking from there and their vision and where we actually are currently. Now, looking at these matters, we also have to look at the issue of economy, because everyone is trying to progress. Every country is trying to progress. Where has Kenya come on this very Mashujaa Day? Now, looking at the economy, according to the World Bank, is forecast to grow 5.5% this year, from 7.5 in 2021, with the slowdown linked to the knock-on effect on the war in Ukraine. Now, Kenya, East Africa's biggest economy, suffered its first contraction in nearly 3 decades in 2020, when the GDP fell by 0.3% due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just within the period, the debt ceiling had received a jerk to 8 trillion. And as matters stand, the pinch of the debt burden has come to be felt by the common mwananchi. Now, to look at this, I'm joined by a mind passionate and committed to advancing local development, Dr. Abraham Rugo Murio. He is currently the country manager and executive director of the International Budget Partnership Kenya. And of note as well, he is a retired vice President of Kenyatta University. Welcome on set, Dr. Rugo.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see you and to meet you.
How is your Mashujaa Day panning out?
No, it's good. It's been a good day spent with family. And just thinking about how can we create the next Mashujaas for this country.
Yes. And looking on those matters of Mashujaas, we can see, like, if we were to try and even envision what let's say the independence fighters were actually gauging for. They wanted freedom in every aspect.
Correct.
And somehow, even within the Holy Book, they say the slave, the borrower is the slave of the lender. Now, looking at Kenya currently, the debt burden, 55% of the GDP is the advisable link concerning the, we should be sailing around there. Currently, we are at 64.2%. And bear in mind, there has been a prediction that probably by the end of 2022, we'll have hit 70%. Dr. How in the red are we concerning our public debt?
I think it's significant, and we are, I think, in the red of the reds, because, when we think about public debt, and I think it's important for us to bring this down, when even you think about, so debt is the loans, is the amount that the government is owed for purposes, for what it has borrowed for purposes of development. And how do we know that, you are on the red even at a personal level? You're on the red if, at least for me, three things are not adding up. One is that you are spending far much more of your income in trying to service your debt. So in the current case, we are spending about 66 shillings out of every 100 shillings that we raise of our income on servicing debt. In other words, we only have about 35 shillings for purposes of everything else. The second one is when the investments that you have spent your money on are not necessarily clear or not showing any return. So you may have just partied all your money, and I mean, nothing wrong if that was your plan, but definitely it does not give you a return on investment. And there is a struggle in trying to understand particularly all the money that we have spent from proceeds of public debt, whether you think about the money like we've spent on Kenya Airways, on state-owned corporations, on different projects of roads, and infrastructure, in water. What exactly, the return on investment is still not clear. And thirdly, is when with all those factors being the economy is not necessarily growing, the revenues that you're making are not necessarily growing, so that then you can assure yourself to be able to provide other services as you continue, because that is not the only thing. So that is not a service per se. It's not healthcare, it's not agriculture, it's not water services. So especially on the second point, when you look at how much we are exporting vis-a-vis how much foreign exchange we are spending in terms of servicing debt, again, so we are literally on the red, and I think the president has been on record saying we are doing badly. There's been enough messages coming through. And I'm one of the people who believe strongly that where we are right now, we are out of our sustainability because of the measures I've just talked about. Okay, now, for every 100 shillings we earn, 66 is going to debt. Debt repayment. Correct. Now, looking at the fact that recently Treasury was very, very outspoken in saying that we have not defaulted in paying our premiums to the ones who we owe. Looking at the fact that this is 65 that is going back to pay debt, which means we leave around only 35% to do anything, yet we have not really even allowed ourselves to look at even the government spending as a whole. Yeah. Now, is it like a time we also sought to like even look for a way of maybe reorganizing our restructuring our loans with these lenders, or even come to maybe even rough decisions like can't pay, won't pay? No, I don't think we have the option of can't pay, won't pay, because what that does is that it sends a distress message to the economic, to the world market. Remember that our debt is in largely three categories. So the first category is that you have domestic debt. This is money that we borrow locally, and that accounts for about 50%. But in terms of repayment risk, fear of default, it's the largest, because we are, for instance, just this year alone, we are likely to spend about 550 or thereabout billion of the 1.3 trillion that we'll spend, which is a significant amount on interest payment to domestic debt alone. So that's domestic debt. Then the second one is that you have external commercial debt. This is debt that we have taken, for instance, the infrastructure bonds, the Euro bonds. This is money that basically we have borrowed from commercial lenders out there. And then thirdly is what we call the multilateral and bilateral kind of arrangements, money that we have borrowed from institutions, financial institutions, and government to government. Now, when you look across, the first two categories are the categories that are almost commercial. They are commercial in nature because, for instance, the domestic debt is issued through, commercial papers, treasury bills and treasury bonds for that purpose. The second category, again, as I have explained, these are commercial. They are high interest, almost, the type of unsecured kind of loans, as one would say. And then you have the last one. The last one perhaps is the easiest to negotiate a restructuring, the bilateral, but it forms currently the smallest portion of our debt. The biggest portion, about 50%, is domestic debt. Then you have another significant amount that is commercial external in nature, and then you have the multilateral and the bilaterals, as I've said. So I don't think we have an option of saying we will not pay, because that sends the wrong message, because we still need resources. But it is time to rethink and to reorganize, particularly how do we renegotiate, for instance, longer repayment periods, and then so that then we can pay smaller premiums, installments, as it were. For instance, this year alone, let me just give you an example. This year alone, we are going to spend about 1.3 trillion of the about 2.1 trillion that we will collect in revenues. What does that exactly mean? It simply means that if, with an income of about 210 Kenya shillings, 130 of that will go into debt repayment. So the negotiation can be, can we reduce this portion but then pay it over a longer period? What happens is that then you end up paying more, but you pay in installments that are manageable. And the reason why you need that desperately is because when you look at the Kenya Kwanza manifesto and the promises that they have made for different sectors, the 35 shillings that is left is not even enough. And we did this calculation at the International Budget Partnership, that once you remove debt and statutory obligations, which basically is pensions, because that's another big conversation I think this country needs to have, and constitutional offices, then you remove the money you're going to send to counties, then you remove internal security, you remove teachers, just the component of teachers, which comes to about 280 billion. You actually are already on the red. You have not paid salaries for any other sector. You already you've already cleared your income. And that's why I'm saying it is critical that that discussion starts happening now, but knowing very well that any restructuring conversation is in and of itself a default of sorts, because you're saying I am not able to honor my commitment as per the agreement I made earlier, and therefore I'm requesting to pull it out. We had a window in 2021 when there was a window basically to renegotiate some but that window closed, and also because of the nature of us being a middle-low income country, then it means there are certain privileges. This is difficult to say, but there are certain privileges that we don't enjoy that are enjoyed by poorer countries. So Kenya is no longer in that space. But this is a long answer of saying that conversation has to be held now, because then there is no other way to free resources. The other option, of course, the other alternatives, the other option is to raise taxes and start charging more taxes, raise more taxes. Already we are doing that. I don't think there is. The measure in which you can push that again further. And the third option is the difficult one, is to actually delay service provision, is to delay projects, is to delay certain programs that need to be done. So that's a long answer to say the options are not necessarily black and white. They're not as straightforward. It's a negotiation, it's a give and take, it's trade-offs.
And looking at the fact that we borrow money, you'll clarify this to me, but I believe we borrow in dollars. or rather foreign currency.
Correct.
So it means we are subject to fluctuations in the international market.
Correct. So as I've said, it's important for me to clarify that 50% of our debt is in Kenya shillings because it's domestic. However, the highest percentage of the external borrowing is in US dollar. So in the last just about 4 or 5 months, our dollar equivalent, and of course it's followed by the euro, then by the pound, and I think then the Chinese currency, and I think Japanese yuan at the end. What that means is that with the fluctuation of just the dollar moving from 115 shillings, I think 113 shillings, 115 shillings, to currently 119, our debt already shot by 300 billion. Because that is the amount that we have in dollar form. So first of all, we are subject, of course, we are affected but we are affected in another way again, is that because of that, it means that we have a shortage of especially when we have less export than imports. In other words, we are not making more foreign currency in. It means we have to spend more Kenya shilling buying the dollar at a more expensive rate. So it's almost becoming a loss in that sense, and therefore servicing becomes very difficult because then it means that your foreign exchange is already there's a shortage. Remember, that's the same one you use to export fuel, the same one you use to buy a lot of the other products. That we import. So that's the current picture in terms of currency.
And it is not a picture that is one that is very attractive, rather. It's a worrying picture. And I'm going to ask you this.
Yeah.
Now, what are the possible alternatives? Because we still need to meet our needs as a country, however much we're servicing these debts. Even if we were maybe to be able to secure longer periods to be able to repay the debts, we still have to run the country. The country still has to move on. What are the alternatives that are possible? Maybe they can be implemented even by the government that is currently in office to be able to ensure that we move smoothly, we don't incur even more debts rather, or will we just have to go to borrow to survive while we are still paying the other debt that we have?
Thank you so much. I think first of all, I think it is important for us to dissuade ourselves from the assumption that our biggest problem is a shortage of cash. So I don't think our problem is that we have a shortage of cash. I think we are dealing with other problems that are not necessarily a shortfall per se. We are dealing with problems of theft of public funds. We are dealing with a problem of lack of accountability. We are dealing with a problem of lack of rule of law, our values that it define and inform, a critical discussion about even our own approach to development. And therefore, because when you have listened to the speeches even of the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, there was a figure that kept moving around, which I was quite curious, a figure of about 2 billion per day. If you just take with me some quick calculation, if you take, we lose 2 billion a day, let's assume that is equivalent to 2 shillings per day. If you multiply that by 365, it gives you a rough figure of about 730 Kenya shillings, which is about 730 billion. Now 730 billion, if you take the deficit of this current financial year is about 862 billion shillings, or rather 800, and if you again I use simple maths of 862 shillings. What that tells you is that the amount we lose is equivalent to the amount we are planning to borrow, because that is what deficit is all about. Now I don't know how much of that 2 billion, if you went back, we had been losing. So if you're assuming every year of Jubilee you lost a similar amount, you lost almost 7 trillion. And you have borrowed just about 9 trillion. It's interesting math if you do it.
And it's also worrying because you say 7 trillion. If you were to calculate that between the time the regime came into power and to this moment, the current debt is currently at 8.64.
It's about 9 trillion almost.
Yeah, it's actually 1.6 away from that level.
So what I'm saying is, we are not dealing with a technical problem per se of how much money we need to spend and how much money we need to borrow. That's not necessarily the issue. is that you are dealing with other externalities about the governance framework, the values system, the accountability structure within which this money is being spent. Because it does not matter. You can borrow as much as you want, but if, I mean, you know, the example of a leaking jerrycan, you can run to the, you know, to fetch the water, you can run back, but as long as your jerrycan is still leaking, I mean, it doesn't matter how fast you run, you know, and how harder you work. We can even increase our tax level, but if a lot of it is still going to be, you know, it's going to pilfer, it's going to be lost. So unless we address the accountability problem, I feel that we are just going to be going round, you know, and circles. That's one. The second one is that indeed there is need to rationalize public expenditure. They call it the whole process around fiscal consolidation. That's the word we use. That's a simple language. That is just a big word that simply means that we need to rationalize how we spend. Are we spending money for the rightful functions at the national level? Are we spending for the rightful functions at the county level? Or are we duplicating? The state-owned corporations, which spend about a third of our budget and also account for a significant amount of the money that is public guaranteed debt, whether you think about Kenya Pipeline, whether you think about Kenya Ports Authority, whether you think about all these state-owned corporations, are they fit for purpose? And are they efficacy? Already today there's been a discussion even about what to do with Kenya Airways, because every year we are bailing it out with billions of shillings. But that's just one example. So unless we work out the efficiency, we work out that we are spending for the rightful purposes, and what that does is that then it starts to show that perhaps our deficit is not the actual deficit. Perhaps the deficit is much more, because then the projects could be rationalized a bit more. Because I don't think it is possible for us to achieve the kind of development we want without a form of borrowing. Other countries also do borrow. But unless you address the rule of law, the efficiency, because in fact if you follow some of the stories around some of the money that has been borrowed, some of it even never got to the country. You know, it got lost somewhere along the way. So for me, I think the conversation is beyond just the numbers. The numbers can easily be balanced, and anybody you talk to can easily tell you. I mean, perhaps we can. But if we have a, you know, we already have, you know, a values problem, you know, an accountability challenge about how we are going about these things, then it means that even if you today reduced the borrowing to a bare minimum, and you still are losing the kind of amount you're talking. I mean, 730 billion is almost equivalent to about 25%, a quarter of the budget every year. So for me, I see the solution not being just reduce the deficit, but we need to address these other very significant issues.
Okay, Daktari, as we finalize, because you're being beaten by time, I'd like to know, like, on the public sphere, there's some very intimidating jargon in the economic sphere that the common mwananchi is like, wachia hawa watu wafanye hiyo hesabu. Something that they are rather not concerned about. Talking about now, coming back to your organization, of which you are the country manager currently, the International Budget Partnership Kenya. Now, among the things that I noted about the organization is that it's very, very key in ensuring there is a participation between the common mwananchi and the ruling class, and to be able to like merge a difference and be able to even keep the mwananchi on toes on understanding what is happening on the public finance sphere. Tell me about this whole initiative and everything that you're doing to ensure the common mwananchi understands what is happening, so that next time we hear like 2 billion is being lost, it's something to be concerned about, because when that report did come about, it just passed like the wind. We had it, shock and awe, then it was done.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's important for me to emphasize that every Kenyan can participate in matters budgets. Budgets are not complicated issues, because budgets are about the priorities that a society chooses to spend its money and its resources on. I think it's important for us to also recall, whether borrowed or whether through taxation, every single shilling, every single cent that the Kenya government spends is your taxes. It is either your taxes now, and for instance, even as I speak, if you pulled out your token bill, if you've bought your tokens from Kenya Power anytime in the recent past, and looked just at all the items charged there, you realize that more rates, more taxes are actually being charged than the service you're buying called electricity. That's just an example. In other words, debt is future tax. So you are either ensuring your current tax is spent properly, or your future tax is spent properly. So our job is to basically make sure that materials around budgets are simplified. They are made accessible to the people. But I think there is a call that we have made making, and I will make it even here, that all of us need to bother ourselves with how resources are being spent where we are. Resources around, for instance, there's a dispensary that is closest to you. Is it functioning properly? Do you know whether it has been allocated resources? Those are county function. The school where you take your children, the road that you use, all this is public information. In other words, we cannot fake ignorance for our lack of participation. And therefore, for us, we come from the point of belief that every Kenyan has the ability, has the possibility to be able to engage in budgets, and with the interest, then ours and many other organizations is to try and provide opportunities. When public participation is called, I know it's very easy to just say, no, nobody listens, nobody cares, but the truth is, at the end of the day, if you and myself and somebody else and 2, 3, 10, 15, 20, 30 Kenyans in every ward, in every village, woke up and said, we want to know how money is being spent in this ward. Those are even votes if you are to think about how politicians think. They will be able to action on that. And therefore, public participation is not only a constitutional provision, but it's something that we must claim for ourselves, as sovereign citizens of this republic. And be able to ask questions, because when more and more of us ask questions, then somebody is compelled to answer them. When more and more of us keep quiet, then it is assumed all is well and all is fine, and therefore, so that's the job we do at the International Budget Partnership Kenya, and we continue, and our website has quite a lot of materials around that, but we are also working to build an army, of budget champions, of budget facilitators across the country, so that then we can support communities and people who want to participate and to be involved in these spaces. Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for right now, and I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Abraham, for coming up and actually being able to bring us up to speed concerning the matters on the public debt and the necessity for us to have an inclusive approach. We have an accountability as taxpayers to participate and to be part of the whole agenda and the whole topic and the whole thing concerning the budget, concerning public finance and how things are moving here and there. And now we're going to move back to our reports on the Mashujaa Day celebrations, where the government is set to lift the healthcare burden from the shoulders of Kenyans through a universal health care program that will reduce the amount of Kenyans that spend on healthcare. This is among the President William Ruto's revelations on his plans to improve healthcare system in the country in today's Mashujaa Day festivities. Take a look.
Speaking during the Mashujaa celebrations, President Ruto noted that the front and center of socio-economic development is the healthcare. He said that Kenyan families spend a total of 150 billion in out-of-pocket expenditures on healthcare a year, mobilized from various sources, including Harambe's, WhatsApp M-Pesa, loans, sale of land and other assets, to pay hospital bills for loved ones.
It is no wonder, then, that it is commonly said that most families and individuals in Kenya are one illness away from poverty. 1 million Kenyans sink into poverty every year because of medical expenses.
President Ruto noted that they will make community health workers the foundation of the health system, describing the healthcare reform as a threefold. He said that the plan is to revitalize primary healthcare by laying more emphasis on preventive and promotive strategies.
Reforming the National Health Insurance Fund is a necessary imperative. Progress has been made in enrolling more members, and in the last 10 years, 12 million Kenyans have joined the fund.
Ruto also noted that they will address the challenge of inadequate human resources in the public service and the poor industrial relations between health professionals and county governments, noting that they are particularly committed to the professional development of health workers.
I take this opportunity to assure our health workers across the board that we have listened to them and we will propose ways in collaboration with county governments of resolving all outstanding issues.
Ruto also noted that in order to achieve these purposes, the government is committed to invest in the digital superhighway and the creative economy, which will be enablers of transformation, productivity, and overall competitiveness. For KUTV, I am Teresia Maluki.
The demand for affordable housing is an opportunity to create jobs and stimulate the economy. Those are President William Ruto's words at the Mashujaa Day celebrations, where he further noted the manufacturing sector will expand in terms of business opportunities. The president is expected also to break ground at Kibera in Soweto B in Nairobi for a housing project which will deliver thousands of social housing units next week on Tuesday.
With the housing gap increasing, President William Ruto has committed to close the gap, which stands at 2 million units as at now. He has said his government is targeting to increase the supply of fourfold from 50,000 to 200,000 per year.
Already, 2,592 units have been completed, 40,000 are under construction, and over 500 units that require financial backstopping and funding for bulk infrastructure are now being worked on and are in the pipeline. I am happy to report today that the interest in the housing sector has grown immensely and that many private investors, including pension funds, have submitted proposals on the housing projects they would like to invest in.
Kenyans are set to have access to affordable housing with mortgage from as low as 5,000 shillings per month through various housing arrangements. The government will plan with the counties to achieve a target of at least 5,000 units in every county.
We therefore proceed with confidence that we will provide quality climate-smart housing that Kenyans can buy with mortgages for as low as 5,000 shillings a month to be made available through various home financing arrangements.
The head of state has said the government will provide land and infrastructure and tackle the issue of implementing projects by lowering VAT inputs on construction. The Juakali sector will be linked with the technical and vocational institutions to create employment to the public.
We are designing the program in a way that will upgrade and support Juakali by linking it to our technical and vocational institutions. In the end, we expect enterprises that produce housing products to emerge and expand, creating jobs and wealth for hustlers, making our housing plan truly transformational from bottom up.
On Tuesday, President Ruto officiated the official opening of affordable housing project in Ongata-Rongai, Kajiado County. About 6.4 million people, all of Kenya's urban population, live in an informal sector. 68% of Kenyans are without land documentation or tenure security. Joseph Thuku, KUTV.
We are swiftly into the sporting arena, where a number of sportsmen and women have been greatly recognized as Kenya's heroes and heroines on today's Mashujaa Day celebrations held at Uhuru Gardens for making Kenya a nation of champions in the global sporting arena. The likes of Kipchoge Keino, Eliud Kipchoge and David Rudisha, amongst others, have exhibited brilliant records, placing Kenya high on the world map.
First man to climb Everest in 1950.
Kenyan sports stars were among the many who received a credit on today's Mashujaa Day celebrations for sweeping world-class crowns in the field of sports.
Miles to school every day.
Eliud Kipchoge, the latest marathon record holder, is one who boasts claiming massive international triumphs, the most recent being breaking his own record in the BMW Berlin Marathon barely a month ago.
He has less than 200 meters to go Eliud Kipchoge.
He as well holds the record of the first human being to make a marathon in under 2 hours, among several others.
140.
Legendary Kipchoge Keino is an athletics champion who was among the pioneers of Kenyan middle and long distance runners a couple of decades ago and made history, setting 2 records within the same year in 1964 that was greatly recognized as heroic. Julius Yego, a javelin record holder, silenced the athletics fraternity in the Beijing World Champions in 2015, where he made the 3rd longest.
Homeboys rugby team has withdrawn from the 2022-2023 Kenya Cup season for the 2nd time in the past 3 years, following a statement from the club chairman Mike Rabah in a rugby board meeting urging on the need to concentrate on development at the grassroots. Rabah, however, said that the team will loan its players to the Cup clubs for the upcoming season once the transfer window is opened. The club finished 8th last season with 19 points from 4 wins and 7 losses. A dominant Manchester United side struck 2 goals in the second half to edge out Tottenham Hotspurs 2-0 at Old Trafford yesterday. Fred Rodriguez found the net 2 minutes into the second half with a deflected shot before Bruno Fernandes curled efforts flew past Hugo Lloris 22 minutes later. In another match, Darwin Núñez headed a goal was enough to see Liverpool triumph over West Ham United at Anfield. At the same time, Chelsea were held to a barren draw against Brentford at Getch Community Stadium.
Tsimikas. It's a lovely ball and the header is fantastic. And Darwin Núñez has scored for Liverpool.